to the playoff edition of our high school football prep video preview. I'm sports editor Gabe Wiston, joined again by Richard Walker, Philip Gardner. We're going to break the videos up into two segments this week and do a Gaston County or a Big South edition and then a Southern Piedmont edition just to get a few more questions in there. First question on the Big South end of things. South Point, obviously, with a great season, great regular season, took care of business in a tough Big South. What are the realistic expectations? Is it championship or bust, or is just a deep run good enough for this South Point team?
Well, as someone who lives in Belmont and have lived through a couple of their state championship runs, they're always going to be measured against those teams that won before. I think the realistic fans over there don't look at it as they have to win to validate this year being a good team, but you're always going to hear if they don't win, well, they weren't as good as 2003 or 1979 or 1971, which is the three previous championship teams, and each one of those have significant players that went on to do great things in college or were just terrific high school football players. And, it's one of those things where over there there have been so many good teams, so many championship teams. I got to believe that Desmond Lowry, Aaron Crumbly, that crew wants to kind of create their own legacy and show that they rank right up there with the previous state championship teams of the past. Although, I would argue, and I bet Phil would too, that, in 03 they won it all. 02 was just as good a team. They just happened to run into a really, really good Winston-Salem Glen team, or a Carver team, in the Western Finals to keep them from going back-to-back. So they would have to be nothing to ashamed of. But I went to the game last year and they lost in the playoffs, and I think there was a mood of unfinished business in Belmont last year, even though they had gone 3 rounds in the playoffs. So I'm sure, the hardcore Raider fans want state championship or nothing and will settle for nothing less than a trip to BB&T Field in Winston-Salem on December, the 13th.
This is not 2003, but I do think as a state championship caliber team, we've seen them just blow through everybody this year, except for Clover, who obviously is a really good team too. To me, they really proved themselves last week by coming from behind in a huge game on the road, and that was my biggest concern with them, is can they work themselves out of a deficit? And they proved last week that they can, and that tells me that this team is ready for a playoff run. They've got a great running game, and the defense has really come to play outside that first week of the season. And, if I'm a South Point fan, I'm thinking, I want to win. I've got a good enough team to win a state championship this year. And that's what all those guys over in Belmont are thinking.
Forest View, obviously, been unsuccessful in the playoffs as far as getting that first win, but this is a good Forest View team with a solid ground attack. Is this the year that they get that win?
I think they finally got off the schneid this year. I thought that, 3 years ago when they were at home? I thought that was really a real good shot at it, because they were, second or third in the conference that year. They won about 7 games, and they had a home playoff game, so they were, basically favored by the seeds. This year is a similar case, but I just think this team's better. Jarquez Alexander, I got to see him personally last week. Man, he runs the ball hard. East Gaston has not had a strong defense this year, but he showed individually why he's such a great running back, because it was taking 4 or 5 hits to knock him down. He was twisting around, breaking tackles, running hard, and I think he can take them to a first-round win. If you're Forest View, the coach said no pressure on winning a playoff game, but I disagree. I think there's a lot of pressure on this team, to validate their season. I think if they don't win this week in the first round, then the rest of the season, it's like, what difference does it make if you don't win a playoff game? And I think that the first round is going to really validate this regular season for them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that among their students and in their community, and the toughest thing that Forest View's got going for them is that, look at the neighbors. Ashbrook's won a state championship in in recent memory. So has South Point. South Point looks to be a chance to win another one. That's who you're competing against. My worry for Forest View is, you look at the games they lost this year, South Point in particular, when it went bad, it really went bad. Well, obviously we don't know much about what Marvin Ridge has, but you got to figure they're better than a good many of the Big South Conference teams that they faced. What will Forest View do if Marvin Ridge were to come out and go up 14-0? Will they do like they did against South Point and kind of implode and kind of get frustrated and not play as hard or as well as they played all year long, or will they kind of summons that resolve deep inside to get this first win. I mean, I agree with you, Phil. I think that in that school and in that community, this playoff losing streak is such an albatross. If they just want to, if they can just get one playoff win, it will kind of end a lot of things. I mean, my concern for them was if they did win, Kannapolis Brown looms in the future. Will they have enough left in the tank? Because there has been such a build-up to finally win a state playoff game, and I think this certainly, if this is the year, you got to start questioning when's it going to be.
Final question, Big South. We got Hunter Huss going to Tuscola, Ashbrook going to Mount Tabor. You know, each one of you pick one of those games and what it'll take for one of those teams to win a road game against a tough opponent.
Well, I saw them play each other last week. Kind of an ugly game, but I'll go with Huss. I mean, Huss has historically had a bit of a hangover after playing big rivalry games. This would certainly qualify. It wasn't the prettiest game that they won last week. They really kind of survived some really bad mistakes, but their defense really kind of hunkered down at times they needed to. I would think that gives them a chance at Tuscola. Certainly Tuscola, you know, went into last week thinking they had a chance to be a number 1 seed. I think they lost to Robertson. So they got to be thinking, you know, they're coming off a loss and how do they react. But, you know, Marshall Williams is the kind of player that you can't really simulate in practice. And it may actually help Hunter Huss to be in an environment where they've never seen Marshall Williams. They don't know how he plays. Because last week he had a good game, but Ashbrook seemed to know what he was doing and had him scattered rule, as they should, because they've seen him for a couple of 3 years, and many of those kids dating back to middle school days. You know, Huss needs to be more low turnover and more efficient, but defensively I think they're there. They got the defense they played last week can win a playoff game, but if they're a little more efficient on offense and a little less mistake prone, I think they can win, although Tuscola is certainly a daunting task for them.
Both these teams have tough matchups. I saw Ashbrook at Mount Tabor in the 3rd round last year, and Mount Tabor just totally shut down the offense. The quarterback couldn't get the ball to Boyd. Boyd just suffered miserably in that game, and I think they could be more of the same this week. I think Ashbrook's got to get a running game going. They've got to find a way to move the ball on the ground because Mount Tabor obviously keyed on Boyd last year, and they're going to do the same again this year. But I think if you get a ground game going, that'll open up Boyd, and then some things can happen. But I tell you what, this Mount Tabor is a really good team. I saw them last year, and based on scores, they're every bit as good this year as they were last year.
That'll wrap up the Big South edition of our prep preview. Wish everybody safe travels on the road this weekend, and we'll see you next week.